Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Obviously, it's a busy morning talking about eSports, the past, the present, and more importantly, the future of eSports. And here today with Tim and Kieran to discuss, is this just a phase? Is this just a short-lived thing that we're seeing with eSports? Or is this a genuine behemoth that could go and overtake the more traditional sports that have dominated global discussion? So I think, guys, the first thing we have to do is we have to define what are esports, at what level does that stop? So, Kieran, I'm sure you must have some thoughts on this. How would you go about setting out the parameters?
Yeah, so with esports, a lot of people say, okay, esports is the professional side of gaming, and then there's gaming, which we all casually do. But I think that's a little bit too narrow. I think esports is any form of competitive gaming. So if you go down with a group of friends to your local LAN cafe, internet cafe, and you play against another group of friends, that's a team sport environment. That's esports. And that's esports at the grassroots level, and then it obviously goes all the way up to the professional level where people are doing it full time.
So if we were to compare that with, with traditional sports, if you were to play in a football league every Sunday in a team, that remains sport, and thus guys who are just playing regularly esports against whoever that might be. Fortunately, with the internet, that could be anyone across the globe. Esports starts at a very low social level, and it goes all the way up to the top, to the most famous gamers in the world.
Yeah, it's usually community-driven in that way. It does definitely start off as a casual thing. And, I mean, every professional esports player started off as a casual gamer. So, yeah.
Tim, your background on this is interesting because you work for a large football club, a traditional football club that's well known in Germany, one of the biggest in Germany. But you've also started an esports team. So how do these two go together? Are they competing strands? How is this going to play out, do you think?
In our club, this is for sure not competing. If it would be like that, we wouldn't do that. At the end, it's two different kind of areas we want to grow, and we want to expand our brand and our Schalke 04. And yeah, you already mentioned my background is I do have a passion for both football and esports. I was a gamer my whole life, and at the end, what you mentioned, it's like it started being a sport when you start having competition. Same with football. When you start playing again, friends of yours, it's at that moment it's sports, amateur sports, and in esports, same.
And so at Schalke, you started the team from scratch. Is that correct?
Yeah, we started 18 months ago, kind of the department. Started all from the scratch. Hired FIFA players, hired eSport, a League of Legends team, and from that moment on, we trying to grow with all of these. We will add more titles in the future for our brand because we are already seeing this is working for us.
Kieran, if you're looking at traditional sports clubs getting involved with esports, does that tell us, one, that they are seeing it as something that could potentially overtake them and they're trying to limit that and harness that? Or do you think that it's just, for them, an opportunity they see some sort of revenue growth and it's something they can hold on to and just see which way it goes?
I don't think if you talk to any sports team, they're going to sit there and go, oh, we're here because we think esports is going to overtake sports. That's not what they're looking to do. I think all sports teams across the globe, I mean, I'm talking to the UK-based Premier League clubs at the moment, and what they're seeing is they look in their stadiums and it's not full of youngsters. And they think by getting people in the door that that's their fan engagement. And what they're really lacking is, content, YouTube, Twitch, whatever, social media, genuine digital content to interact with their fans. And that's what all young people are doing at the moment. They're just consuming this digital content. And I think that's what sports is trying to do from esports, is engage with the younger demographic and gain more fans that way. And I think, esports can learn a lot from traditional sports, and traditional sports can learn a lot from esports. I don't think that it's necessarily a battle, and I actually wrote an article recently that said, I don't care whether you call esports sports or not. It's its own phenomenon, and it has to be treated like that.
I think here, maybe to add that, to add a point here, I think the sport clubs or the traditional sport clubs shouldn't be that afraid about all the esports hype. I think more afraid, TV stations need to be more afraid about that, because what is all about? What is the young generation spending time for? Back in the days, it was sport and watching TV and playing with friends outside. Nowadays, it's way more playing computer games, doing sports, hopefully, because young kids should also do traditional sports, but they don't watch TV anymore. So there is a shift of spending their leisure time not anymore on TV, still for sports and for gaming, and at the end it's esports then.
So do you think the very question, are esports just a phase, is partially because the mainstream society doesn't see these things, because the television companies aren't involved, because the internet has facilitated new ways of broadcasting, and Twitch being the most obvious example, but YouTube obviously enormous. The fact that broadcasters aren't involved in these means that a lot of society won't see it. As you actually identified, the football clubs are looking to engage a demographic, which is largely young males between, say, the age of 12 and 25. Do you think the fact that esports interests at the moment such a narrow demographic is a weakness?
No, I think for brands it's a massive positive, because it gives them a clear reason to get involved in the space, because they see, okay, I need to hit this market, this is what I'm missing. Esports is the way to do that. Just to touch on your point about broadcasters, that's a really interesting one, because what we're actually seeing is broadcasters are now trying to get involved with esports, because they're seeing the numbers that it's producing digitally, and they're going, we want a piece of that. You know, in the UK, we've had BBC Three, BT Sport. They've been supporting esports recently, which is a completely new thing for esports. We're not really sure how to deal with that. And I don't know whether broadcasters are really needed in esports, because we're already reaching such great numbers in terms of, you know, the digital content. But I certainly think it can only be a positive to reach, as you say, a more mainstream audience.
Is this something that resonates with you, what you've seen in Germany, is that Schalke need to engage a different demographic, because if you look around the Veltins arena, there just aren't an abundance of young people?
It is an issue every sports club and football club is facing at the moment. Look at the stadiums; they are almost sold out. Yes, still it is like that. But if you dig a little bit deeper, the demographics are kind of old, and you shouldn't feel too safe because the stadiums are sold out now. You have to look in the future. So you have to attract young people with our brand. And one of these attractions will be computer gaming and esports. And hopefully we converge them. And we heard this morning with a panel of my brother that most people are interested are male. So a lot of male people are also interested in football, so there are a lot of synergies for us to getting these people really into our stadiums again, and hopefully to have also in the next 10 and 20 years a sold-out Veltins arena.
Just to touch on that as well, just to build on that, I'm going to toot Tim's horn a little bit here, because FC Schalke have done it brilliantly the way they've approached esports. They've created this, you know, sub-brand, whatever you want to call it, which is its own esports brand, but it still has all of the power that the FC Schalke brand brings to it. And then you can do things at a very, very basic level, like have a FIFA competition at the stadium. You're going to engage with your fans. The winner maybe gets a box seat or, you know, a signed shirt or something like that. That's a very simple way to merge the two industries, I think. But you know, you guys have done it fantastically.
And we will do it more sophisticated. And in the future, we will have a whole gaming area around the arena where, for example, at match day, 60,000 people are around, and they also can spend time before the match or after the match in this area with the kids, or just competing, playing new computer games, seeing innovational things. So this is how we want to get the best synergy out of that.
What do you think is the biggest barrier to esports continuing to grow? Like, if there was one thing that might stop or stunt the growth, what do you think that would be?
So from a purely esports perspective, the real struggle I've had running a team in the UK is getting interest from non-endemic brands. So for the endemic gaming brands, it makes a lot of sense for them to be in the space. They get it. Okay, this team, high-performing team, they use our high-performing equipment to be that good, right? That makes sense. But then you look at the non-endemics, and they know that esports is this new shiny thing, but they don't really know how to get involved with it, and they don't know how it works with their brand. Now that is actually a massive advantage with football clubs coming over, because these non-endemics already have, football's got such a long history, and non-endemics are already involved in that. So if you're seeing football clubs come over to esports, they can bring those brands with them. So I'm all for football clubs investing into the space. I think it's brilliant.
So you think there's potentially symbiotic relationships where the football clubs can help bring commercial attention and commercial interest, and thus commercial money, into esports just through their traditional kind of brands?
100%, yeah, exactly.
I think it's already happening. In Germany, I think with our entrance to esports, a lot of traditional media started broadcasting and reporting about that. So it was a much brighter interviews, all of these stuff around the big medias in Germany with our entrance.
If we're looking at it in terms of, is this just a phase? What we're saying is, do we think in 10 years, for example, this will still be around? Now, it's very difficult in a sphere that's so fast moving, because 10 years ago, you could never imagine the things that we've seen and how things are now. In 10 years' time, esports should be a significant beast, really. It should be a huge, huge industry in its own right, and it's going to have its own distribution channels, likely. But, when we discussed this and said, will they overtake traditional sports, it slightly underplays the fact that traditional sports could decline. And we see with American football, there are concerns over how safe those sports are and things. With esports, do you think to become a mainstay, to become a mainstream thing that people realize is huge, do they need to appeal to a wider demographic? I know you said that commercially it's important because advertisers can hit the exact demographic they want. But at some point, do they have to say, right, we do need to appeal to a wider section of society?
I think that's an interesting point. I think I think it's very game-based, so I think there are some games that do appeal to a much wider audience. So I think as developers get wise to that and start developing games that do appeal to a wider audience, we will see that anyway, naturally, that will happen in terms of making it more mainstream. But I mean, I was speaking to Tim before, and he made a really good point that, for as long as gaming is around, and gaming has been around for however many years, it's a community-based thing, and it's if that's still there, esports is still going to be there, and I can't envisage in 10, 20, 30 years a better way of entertainment than gaming. Like, that is going to be the way of entertainment.
And as we discussed at the beginning, esports starts at the very basic social level. If that's, Tim playing with his brother and growing up doing that, then that is the beginning of the kernel of esports. So do we think that as an industry, and it's going to become a highly commercialized industry, when the brands come on board, do you think it's more important that they learn to understand first, or do you think that it's important that they invest on kind of getting on the ground floor, as it were, and then work with people to learn more about the industry? Because in football, you're seeing, obviously, the people that want to get involved, but they don't quite get it yet.
Again, what is the question?
Well, I mean, you're working in an industry, really, where people like Coca-Cola will come in and they might have the money and they want to get involved.
Yeah.
But if they don't understand it, do you feel like your role partially is just to explain to them why these things are relevant?
Absolutely. So we are still at the point that we have to educate them and give them an idea how to be involved in all of that. And it's not like just putting your logo on the jersey and that's it. Like 20 years ago in football also happened. It's more like you have to create a storyline about that. It's all about content, and you have to be innovative with that to interact with the audience, because the esport audience and the gaming community, they are kind of complicated. You cannot get to them with classical advertisement. No way. They don't watch TV. Most likely they have ad blockers. So and they don't listen to advertising. So you have to be created as a company who is investing in esports, but not just in esports. I think in any kind of sponsoring, it's not just about logo integration anymore.
That's when we spoke about earlier how sports can learn from esports. Gone are the days when you can just slap a name on a football team's jersey and see ROI from that. I mean, there's no trackable ROI from that, really. You know, that's the advantage that esports has. It's completely digital, which means the data is very easily tracked.
So what examples do you have of, so esports have learned from sports and sports have learned from esports, vice versa, you know? What examples do you have of traditional sports learning from this new wave?
So something that we touched upon earlier, the content side of things is really something that traditional sports are learning from esports, and hopefully Tim can vouch for that in FC Schalke. Hopefully they've seen that the way their esports division is running, they should be doing parts of that with their football division as well. And I think the other way round, there's a lot of regulatory issues with esports that have come out recently, some of it in widespread news, and that's something that we can definitely learn from the sports industry because they've been and done all that sort of stuff. So
yeah, so it's important for esports, I guess, to have some sort of governance, to have some sort of administration that can keep it within a framework, because at the moment it does feel a little bit fluid. You know, there are kind of rival competitions and things like this, but do you think that once that is achieved, and presumably it is achievable, do you think once that is achieved that esports are certainly here to stay, Tim?
It's definitely helpful if so, but honestly, it's not that fluid and not that complicated like a lot of people still think it is. You have to get that there are different titles and they have different structures. But same with sports. Football works different than tennis or the boxing federations, whatever. So you have to focus on the topics you are investing in, and then it's not that complicated. It's really not like that. So it is always good to have a government or someone who is structuring the things. But for example, League of Legends, Riot is structuring a lot, maybe too much.
That's the key point, is that esports, although it is this umbrella term, it's not one thing. And I think obviously that's evident for people that are in the industry. But from outside the industry, esports is a collection of different esports. So different titles, different developers. And the ecosystem is essentially developers, event organizers and brands or teams, and we're obviously both on the team side of things. And that ecosystem is the same in each esport, it's just they'll be organized slightly differently. The game developer might want more control, might want less control. The event organizer may organize a league, they may organize a knockout tournament. You know, it's the same as in sports in that respect, I think.
I think hopefully it's been informative for everyone here. It's certainly been informative for me. I'd like to thank Kieran, I'd like to thank Tim. I'd like to thank you all for paying attention for this long, and I hope you have a great web summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.